we talked about Mars quite a bit this year, and we tend to. In fact, we were lucky enough to kind of start off the year, our February show. We had Dr. Matt Golombek. He was one of our wonderful guests this year. So Mars has a bunch of landers that have landed on it in the past. Perseverance and Curiosity are the two that are still roving and are active. And also Insight, the lander, I'm going to talk a little bit about here in just a second, tell you maybe a little sadder of an update. Well, on Mars, we got weather updates every single day from both of the Insight lander, but also from Perseverance. And you can see here back on March 23rd, 2022, it was actually kind of a nice day, 22 degrees Fahrenheit, not too windy. Again, the atmosphere is only about 1% as thick as Earth. So even on a highly windy day, it's not going to blow your cat away or anything like that. And let's check out today and see what it looks like. Well, in Jezero Crater, we've been there 633 sols, which is a single day on Mars. The high today was all of 3 degrees Fahrenheit. The low is minus 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, bring your extra blankets. Perseverance didn't just give us the weather, measured the speed of sound on Mars. And what's interesting about that is below about 400 hertz. Where isn't middle A like 410 or 420, something like that? Anybody in our chat know what A is? I thought it was around there. So it's interesting. It breaks at that point. But above that, the speed of sound on Mars is 537 miles per hour, and above 400, it's 559 miles per hour. Here on Earth, at sea level, it's 761, but it's for all wavelengths, all sounds. So imagine what it sounds like on Mars. Things must sound really strange. Well, lo and behold, NASA, of course, has made a website where you can go listen to what it sounds like. Just type in Google, sounds on Mars. What does it sound like? You can listen to birds. You can listen to a bicycle bell. Birds nearly go away. You can't hear their chirp at all. It's very, very strange. Perseverance should also be known. It's this rover that we sent to go take samples. It was supposed to go to these positions, look for locations that could have had life in the past, do as much investigation as we possibly could, and then find good samples to store, to be retrieved and brought back to Earth labs where we can really, really study them and find out, is there life or not? This is a spot here called Yori's Pass, where again, we're seeing sandstones that were made up of individual pebbles that were brought from long distances, all sorts of different rocks. So fascinating rocks that are here where we're able to measure things from many different locations, and the rocks themselves were brought from different locations. You can see dark rocks and light rocks, volcanic rocks, and again, sedimentary rocks like sandstone. Perseverance has been measuring all of these, and some of the most interesting ones that we've gotten samples of have had these sort of veins going through them. Now, why do we care about veins? It isn't just that they're neat to look at, as you can see in this image. It's that they formed after the main rock. The main substrate there that's sitting there was formed at a time, and then it cracked open, and then water flowed down in there and brought those other minerals. So it gives us a picture of Mars at two different times: the early time when the main rock formed, and then a much later time when those minerals were deposited in there. And that later time, we're discovering those minerals could have droplets of water sealed inside of them, for all we know, a very small amount of water, which could be a sample of what the liquids were like there. We're also seeing evidence in these samples of organic compounds. Now, organic doesn't mean life compounds, but life does need organic compounds. So, and life can produce organic compounds as well. But we can't tell with Perseverance whether these organics were left behind by life or whether they were left behind by other natural processes. All we know is they're interesting. We've taken samples. We can bring them back to Earth, and maybe there's enough information there for us to be able to tell that, yeah, this most likely formed by life. It's possible. This is the right sort of habitat. It was liquid. It had sunlight. It had the right elements. So these are exciting times. This is what Perseverance was sent to go do, and it's actually taking these measurements and taking these samples. So very exciting times in 2022 with Percy. Now, less exciting, although expected, was our poor InSight lander. InSight was sent to Mars with such high hopes of we're going to measure earthquakes and we're going to have this mole that's going to drill down inside and we're going to listen and measure the temperature distribution and really kind of study the insides of Mars with this kind of off-the-shelf lander that used parts that were from like the Phoenix lander, had parts that were very similar to this. So it wasn't an expensive mission in the grand scheme of things. But today, those panels are now covered in dust. The poor spacecraft is not getting enough energy, and we expect it to be shut down. It could be any day. It could already have been shut down for all we know. Maybe that's the last announcement is coming. However, let's celebrate some of the things it did do. It measured earthquakes, or Marsquakes as the case is. Here's one of the biggest ones it measured. So it was able to study the interior of Mars. Turns out that the crust is a little thinner than we expected, kind of two crusts. There's an upper crust and a lower. Turns out that the core, that deep down inside there, is larger and more liquid than we expected it to be. Now, still, it's cooled off, we think, so it must be mixed up. That iron core probably has other elements mixed up in there trying to keep it liquid. So very interesting. Here's the seismometer there that it placed with that cover over it. But I also just love this animation of multiple images. It's not an animation as in we faked it. It's they stitched it together. You can see the clouds passing by. That's what that brightening and darkening is. You're actually watching the high clouds pass on Mars, which is pretty amazing from this little lander. Here, the lander was actually able to measure a couple of impacts. And those impacts came from space. A little object came flying in, made a crater on Mars, and those waves travel through Mars, those earthquake waves essentially, or impact waves, and InSight was able to measure it. So this impact here was measured and detected by the lander, and here it is again, and you can see the white stuff that was thrown out of there is very likely to be frozen water. So that's probably frozen water ice. If you took an image of the same crater later, that's fun to say. If it did that, the white frozen water will be gone. You won't see that there any longer. So one of my favorite missions on Mars or recently is, of course, Perseverance, but I wanted to update you about InSight and the sad news, but it did accomplish its mission. So quite exciting.